You could have the right outfit, say all the right words, and still destroy your image in seconds, all because of one thing you did in public. Most people never realize the damage until it's already done. But you're not most people. You're here to learn what they never will. There's a difference between being authentic and being emotionally reckless. In the name of vulnerability, many people cross a line they're not even aware of. They start unloading personal struggles in public settings without realizing the impact. Whether it's a casual conversation at a gathering, a workplace meeting, or even a moment of silence among acquaintances, turning it into a therapy session doesn't make you real. It makes you unaware. And that lack of awareness costs you something valuable: trust and respect. When someone constantly brings up their personal problems in public, what they're doing, often unconsciously, is asking for emotional caretaking. They're hoping for sympathy, connection, maybe validation. But what actually happens is the opposite. The people around them begin to feel uneasy, burdened, or trapped. The energy shifts. The focus becomes about managing someone else's emotional landscape instead of simply being present. That's not connection. That's emotional imposition. Respect isn't just about how smart, talented, or kind you are. It's about how contained you are. Oh, people respect those who manage themselves, who know what to share, when to share it, and most importantly, with whom. When you drop deep personal issues into light social situations or professional environments, it signals one thing: poor boundaries. And poor boundaries don't create intimacy. They trigger avoidance. It's not that people don't care. It's that people feel unsafe when someone doesn't know how to self-regulate. They begin to associate you with chaos, with unpredictability. They'll still smile, still nod, maybe even say a few kind words, but something inside them will step back. And the next time they see you, they may hesitate before engaging again. That's not coldness. That's self-preservation. Being emotionally intelligent isn't about hiding your pain. It's about knowing how to hold it without making it someone else's burden, especially without consent. The strongest people don't always share everything. Speak with precision. They read the room. They understand the difference between unprocessing and oversharing. When you feel that urge to vent publicly, ask yourself, is this the right moment? Are these the right people? Have they earned the weight of this part of me? If the answer is no, then take a pause. What you choose not to say is often more powerful than what you do. Not because you're being fake, but because you're being intentional. Protecting your inner world isn't about secrecy. It's about stewardship. The deeper parts of you deserve a safe container, not a loud platform. And when you learn to manage that, when you stop offering your wounds as small talk, something shifts. People start to listen to you differently. They lean in instead of pulling away, because now your presence feels stable, safe, strong. That's the kind of energy people gravitate toward. Not the one that begs to be rescued, but the one that has clearly done the work of rescuing themselves. That's the difference between being seen as dramatic versus being seen as grounded. And in any public space, that difference makes all the difference. Mocking or mimicking someone in public might seem like humor to the one doing it, but to everyone else in the room, it often reads as insecurity in disguise. People who imitate others' mannerisms, speech patterns, accents, or mistakes aren't displaying confidence. They're attempting to elevate themselves by lowering someone else. It's a cheap tactic that momentarily draws attention, but at the expense of long-term respect. Real confidence doesn't require comparison or ridicule. It's quiet. It's grounded. It makes space for others instead of shrinking them. When someone mocks another person, especially in front of others, what they're really revealing is a need to dominate the moment, to get laughs, to seem clever, or to assert control. But any sense of power gained through that act is false and fleeting. It signals emotional immaturity and a lack of social awareness. People remember how you made them feel, and no one forgets being the punchline of someone else's joke. The person being mocked might not speak up, but inside they're withdrawing. They begin to question your intentions, your empathy, and your emotional intelligence. And so does everyone watching. The audience may laugh along, but But what they're also doing is filing away a silent note. You're not someone who can be trusted with vulnerability. Mimicking others also reveals where your attention is not inward, not focused, not grounded, but outward, scanning for flaws to exploit. It's a survival mechanism dressed as humor. The most secure people in any room don't have the time or interest to point out others' quirks. They're too centered for that, too rooted. They're busy building connection, not commentary. When you mock someone, even lightly, you train the room to wonder who's next. That kind of behavior creates a culture of tension and guardedness. People stop opening up. They start performing around you instead of relaxing. And once people feel like they have to filter their personality in your presence, you've lost something valuable, authentic connection. There's also a deeper cost. The habit of mocking others hardens you. It turns your attention away from curiosity and into criticism. You stop seeing people's humanity and start cataloging their imperfections. That mindset isolates you more than you realize. Because while you're busy trying to look sharp and funny, others are slowly stepping back, unwilling to be next in line for judgment. The truth is, anyone can mock. It takes no strength, no discipline, no self-awareness. But to be in a room, observe people with all their uniqueness, and still choose respect over ridicule, that takes maturity. That builds character. That makes you memorable for the right reasons. When you carry yourself with real presence, there's no need to mimic. You become the one others watch, not because you're the loudest, but because you're the safest. And in a world full of critics, being safe is the most powerful position you can hold. Every time you glance at your phone during a conversation, you're sending a clear message. The person in front of you isn't your priority. You may not say it out loud, but your body language speaks volumes. Constantly checking your phone in public spaces doesn't make you look busy or important. It makes you look distracted, disengaged, and disinterested. Worse, it chips away at the presence and connection you could be building in that moment. We've conditioned ourselves to treat the phone like a lifeline, as if every ping or notification demands immediate attention. But presence is a decision, and when you choose the screen over the person, you're not just breaking eye contact, you're breaking trust. People feel it. They feel dismissed. They may not call you out, but they remember. They start pulling away, they stop sharing deeply, and slowly a wall begins to build. What many don't realize is that your ability to put the phone down signals strength. It shows that you control your attention, not the other way around. It reflects boundaries, not just with others, but with yourself. The discipline to remain fully present is rare, which is why it stands out so strongly. Gravitate to those who make them feel seen, heard, and prioritized. You can't offer that while half scrolling and half listening. In social settings, phone checking breaks the flow. In professional ones, it erodes credibility. In intimate ones, it chips away at emotional safety. Every unnecessary glance at your phone is like turning your back mid-sentence. It doesn't matter how much you explain it. What matters is how it feels to the other person. And once that feeling is lost, it's hard to rebuild. The irony is that people think constant phone checking shows they're responsive, but it actually shows poor control over their time and energy. True responsiveness is intentional. It's knowing when to engage, when to unplug, and when to give your full self to the moment at hand. If you're always reachable, always reactive, always checking in, you're never really here, and people sense that. There's power in stillness. There's presence in undivided attention. When you speak to someone and they know you're not splitting your focus with a screen, they relax, they lean in, they trust you more. That's how influence is built, not by doing more, but by being fully there in what you choose to do. If you want to lead, connect, influence, or be remembered, let your phone take a back seat. Not because you're rejecting technology, but because you're choosing intentionality. In a world where everyone's half distracted, the person who's fully present becomes magnetic. Be that person, not the one who constantly checks out and calls it multitasking, but the one who knows that real connection starts where the phone ends and attention begins. Saying sorry should be an act of integrity, not a habit of insecurity. But for many people, over-apologizing becomes a reflex, a default response to discomfort, disagreement, or simply existing. You bump into someone slightly. Sorry. You voice your opinion. Sorry. You take up space in a meeting or walk into a room. Another, sorry. It might sound polite on the surface, but underneath, it's a quiet form of self-erasure. When you apologize constantly, you're not just expressing humility, you're undermining your own presence. Tells the world you believe you're an inconvenience, a disruption, or that your actions, even when reasonable, require justification. That message may not be your intention, but it becomes your impression. And impressions shape how people treat you, respect you, and remember you. Over-apologizing is often rooted in a desire to be liked, to avoid conflict, or to appear agreeable. But ironically, it can have the opposite effect. Instead of making you seem kind or thoughtful, it can come across as anxious, unsure, or lacking self-worth. People don't trust what you say if you constantly backtrack. They don't take your words seriously if they're always wrapped in unnecessary apologies. There's a difference between being polite and being submissive. A sincere apology has weight because it's rare and intentional. It says, I take responsibility. But when you say sorry for things that don't require it, like expressing your needs, disagreeing respectfully, or simply taking up space, you dilute the meaning of every apology that actually matters. It also affects how you feel about yourself. Each unnecessary sorry is a small reinforcement of the belief that you're wrong for showing up as you are. Over time, it chips away at your self-respect. You start editing yourself before you even speak. You walk into rooms quieter, take up less space, ask for less, and expect less. Not because others told you to, but because your own words have conditioned you to believe you're a burden. People with true confidence don't over-apologize, not because they're arrogant, but because they know their worth. They recognize that not every moment requires an apology. Some moments require clarity, some require boundaries, and some simply require silence. Being able to differentiate between the three is emotional intelligence. The next time you feel the urge to say, sorry, pause and ask yourself, did I actually do something wrong? Or am I just uncomfortable being seen? If you're just trying to ease tension or seek approval, consider replacing sorry with gratitude or assertiveness. Instead of sorry, I'm late, say thank you for your patience. Instead of sorry for speaking up, try, here's what I think. Those small shifts reinforce strength, both in you and in the way others perceive you. There is humility in owning your mistakes, but there's also power in standing firm without apologizing for your existence. You don't need to shrink to be kind. You don't need to say sorry to be accepted. You just need to show up grounded, intentional, and unapologetically present. Confidence isn't loud, and it definitely isn't needy, yet so many people unknowingly sabotage their presence by constantly seeking validation out loud. It sounds like harmless questions. Was that okay? Do you think I did a good job? Did that make sense? But those questions, especially when asked repeatedly and publicly, reveal something deeper than a desire for feedback. They expose an internal lack of certainty. And that lack is what people remember more than the words you said or the actions you took. When you seek constant reassurance, you're telling the room you don't fully believe in your own value. That maybe you're waiting for someone else to confirm your worth before you're willing to own it. That hesitation, that outward search for approval, immediately weakens your position, not because you aren't capable, but because you haven't claimed your authority before asking others to trust it. People don't just hear your words, they read your energy. And if your energy says, please tell me I'm enough, they respond not with trust, but with caution. Quiet authority isn't about ego or dominance, it's about calm assurance. It's felt in the pauses, the eye contact, the way you finish a sentence without nervously looking around to see if it landed. It's in the way you don't rush to fill the silence because you're not afraid of your own presence. But when you follow every contribution with a question mark of approval, you undercut your own credibility. Train others to evaluate you instead of listen to you. Validation seeking also shifts the focus away from impact and onto insecurity. Instead of letting your words breathe, you pull the spotlight back onto yourself, trying to make sure you were received the way you wanted. But real presence requires detachment. Say what needs to be said, offer what needs to be offered, and then let go. Not everyone will clap. Not everyone will agree. That's okay. Confidence is about being able to stand in your truth, even when no one applauds it. What many people don't realize is that asking for too much validation actually makes others less likely to give it. Why? Because reassurance becomes a chore, not a compliment. It turns connection into caretaking, and no one wants to constantly manage someone else's self-esteem. Over time, people begin to pull back, not because they dislike you, but because your need becomes a weight they didn't sign up to carry. You can still ask for feedback. You can still care how others feel, but the key is timing and tone. Ask privately, ask sparingly, ask from a place of curiosity, not desperation. There's a difference between "did that make sense?" and "how can I make that clearer?" One is validation seeking. The other is growth driven. When you stop chasing validation out loud, something powerful happens. You become the person who doesn't need constant approval to keep showing up. And that's stability. That's what earns respect. That's what makes people want to listen. Because in a world full of noise, the person who trusts themselves becomes the one others trust. Most people argue to win. They want to be right, to prove a point, to deliver the final word like it's some kind of victory. But in the process, they lose something far more valuable than the argument. They lose the chance to be remembered for the right reasons. Because when you make a conversation a battlefield, people don't walk away feeling impressed. They walk away feeling exhausted. And no one seeks out the company of someone who leaves them feeling small, cornered, or unseen. Arguing to win is often disguised as passion, but underneath it is usually ego. It's the desire to dominate, not to connect. It's not about expanding perspectives. It's about shrinking the other person's voice. And the truth is, the louder and more aggressive you get, the less influence you hold. People might go quiet when you argue hard, but it's not because they agree. It's because they're retreating. They've stopped engaging and started protecting their energy. What sets influential people apart is that they argue to understand, not to conquer. They listen more than they speak. They ask questions instead of raising their voice. And when they respond, they do it with clarity, not combat. This kind of presence is rare, which is why it stands out. It doesn't demand attention, it earns it. People remember how safe they felt being heard, even in disagreement. That's what builds trust. That's what makes you magnetic. In public settings, especially in professional or social spaces, how you handle disagreement says everything about your emotional intelligence. Anyone can get loud, interrupt, or double down. That takes no skill. But to stay calm, grounded, and genuinely open when someone challenges you, that's strength, that's control. And that's what earns long-term influence. The person who argues just to be right often leaves the impression of arrogance, even if they were technically correct. The person who listens first and responds with respect leaves a mark that lasts much longer. People don't remember every word you say, but they remember how you made them feel. Did you invite dialogue or shut it down? Did you leave space for both voices or just yours? There's also a quiet power in walking away from an argument you don't need to win. Not because you're afraid, but because you've outgrown the need to prove yourself in every room. That kind of restraint speaks louder than any clever comeback ever could. It tells the world, I know who I am. I don't need to dominate to matter. Arguing to understand doesn't mean you lack conviction. It means you value connection more than control. And in the long run, that mindset makes you unforgettable. Not because you crushed someone with your logic, but because you elevated the room with your presence. That's the kind of power that doesn't just win arguments, it earns lasting respect. There's a subtle but damaging pattern that plays out in public conversations, meetings, and social settings, the need to overshadow others just to be noticed. It can look like interrupting someone mid-sentence, turning every story into a personal anecdote or always finding a way to steer the spotlight back onto yourself. On the surface, it may seem like confidence or charisma, but at its core, it reveals something deeper: emotional immaturity and insecurity dressed up as self-importance. The need to shine by dimming others doesn't come from strength. It comes from a belief that worth is scarce, that in order to be seen, someone else has to be unseen. But that mindset only builds temporary attention, not lasting respect. People might laugh at your joke, nod at your story, or even smile at your interruption. But underneath, they're watching how you treat the people around you. And when they see you consistently take up space at someone else's expense, they remember. They may not say anything out loud, but the silent judgment begins to form. True presence doesn't need a spotlight. It creates one for others. Emotionally mature people understand that power is expanded, not hoarded. They know how to step forward when needed and how to step back so others can rise. They aren't afraid of someone else's success, voice, or perspective. In fact, they welcome it because they know their value doesn't shrink just because someone else is shining too. When you consistently try to outdo, outtalk, or outshine, you become exhausting to be around. Conversations stop being collaborative and start feeling competitive. People become guarded, holding back ideas or stories because they know you'll likely hijack them. What could have been connection turns into performance. And that performance comes with a cost: the erosion of trust and relational depth. The irony is, the more you try to be the center of attention, the less people feel drawn to you. Not because you're not talented or smart, but because your energy doesn't feel safe. People don't feel like they can relax around you because they're always bracing for the moment you'll take over. That creates distance, not admiration. Real leadership and presence come from being confident enough to let others speak fully, to amplify instead of compete. Celebrate others' brilliance without inserting your own. That doesn't make you invisible. It makes you powerful in a different way. It shows you've mastered something many never do: the ability to elevate a room without needing to dominate it. If you truly want to be respected, remembered, and trusted, resist the urge to constantly prove your worth. Let your actions speak. Let your presence breathe. Let others shine without fear that it takes anything away from you, because the ones who don't chase the spotlight often end up owning it. And the ones who know how to share it, those are the people everyone wants to follow. Power isn't found in volume, it's found in control. There's a common misconception that speaking louder commands authority, that raising your voice somehow increases your value in a conversation. But the truth is, the need to speak over others often signals a lack of internal grounding. It's not power, it's panic in disguise. Because people who are truly confident don't need to raise their voice to be heard. Their calm presence does the speaking for them. When someone starts to talk louder to make a point, it usually reveals that they're not trying to connect. They're trying to dominate. They're focused on winning, proving, or overpowering rather than being understood. And ironically, the louder they get, the less people listen, because loud voices create noise. Composure creates clarity. It allows space for impact, for tension, for presence. That silence between your words, it says more than shouting ever could. Composure is quiet strength. It's the ability to stay centered when others escalate, to remain steady when others rush to fill the silence. It shows people that you are in control, not just of the situation, but of yourself. And that kind of control builds credibility fast. Become someone who doesn't flinch, doesn't scramble, doesn't need to perform. You speak with intention, not intensity. And people feel that. There's also a psychological edge to composure. When everyone else is reacting and you're the one who remains grounded, the room naturally turns to you. People instinctively look for someone who feels stable, someone who isn't easily moved by pressure or emotion. That's the person they trust. That's the person who leads. And that trust is earned not through volume, but through presence. Talking louder can also backfire. It can trigger defensiveness, resistance, or withdrawal in others. You might win the moment, but you lose the connection. People remember how you made them feel, and being bulldozed by someone's voice doesn't inspire loyalty or respect. it creates distance. And in that distance, your influence fades. Composure, on the other hand, invites people in. It slows down the energy. It makes space for others to speak, and in doing so, gives weight to your own words when you do. The most impactful voices in any room are often the quietest, not because they lack something to say, but because they know exactly when to say it and how. There's no need to raise your voice when you've already raised your standards. No need to shout when your presence already commands attention. The real work is learning to hold that energy without releasing it through volume. It's learning to channel emotion into conviction, not chaos. That's what people respect. That's what people remember. In a world full of noise, the calm voice becomes the loudest, and the person who doesn't need to overpower to be powerful. That's the one everyone listens to when it really matters.